In this presentation, we're going to discuss hazard recognition at the Celanese site. By the end of this module, you should be able to identify many hazards in the workplace, how to utilize techniques to manage the risks of hazards that you encounter while working, understand the typical traps that people fall into when considering whether or not something is a hazard, or when considering whether a hazard is low or high risk, and understand how to utilize tools for understanding risk severity. Sphurion and Celanese's hazard recognition philosophy is that we believe all injuries are preventable. Sphurion hires people who understand that all injuries are preventable. It's one of our interview questions before we even send you for a tour on the site. We must actively work to recognize hazards in order to prevent injuries and other losses. So we don't prevent injuries by just hoping everything is going to be okay. We actively look for situations that could result in injury. Hazards that are not managed can lead to devastating incidents. For one example, in 2015 in Tianjin, China, a container storage facility exploded, killing 173 people and injuring 797. And that was just caused by an improperly stored chemical. So if someone would have spotted the storage issue with that chemical, it could have prevented that horrific tragedy. And then in 2018, a 61-year-old worker was killed when struck by a forklift driver traveling forward with a load obstructing his view. The driver was seen running 6 stop signs that day and was sentenced to prison for reckless homicide. So hazardous behavior can impact you beyond getting injury or injuring other people. It can result in criminal penalties, losing your job, all sorts of things. So it's real important that we prevent these hazards before they happen. So hazards exist in every workplace. It takes skill and your full attention to uncover conditions that and behaviors that can cause illness and injuries. So some common hazards that we can see in our workplace are electrical hazards, slippery floors, forklift operation, stored energy, behavior, dust, temperature, poorly stored aerosols, chemicals, sharp equipment, conveyors, falling objects, moving machinery, noise, broken tools, and hot surfaces. Now, a few of those you can't really see. They're more something that you sense with your other senses, like noise and temperature. But they can still present hazards. So take a quick look at this picture and try to find for a few moments a couple of hazards that you see going on in this picture. Okay, let's go over a few of them. First of all, the gentleman down at the bottom left of the page is blowing his uniform off with an air wand. That is absolutely a no-no. You've got poor housekeeping all over the place, loose pipe stock, someone underneath the elevated pipe load that's being lifted by the crane there, a lady in a dress, not properly dressed, about to walk into an opening in the floor. You have a ladder propped up on a piece of wood, which is, not proper. First aid box is all all in disrepair. The man climbing the ladder is carrying tools, and it looks like the tools are going to fall out of there. There's another gentleman right behind him that is throwing a hammer to another employee who is also not properly dressed. There's a man holding live electrical wires. That forklift is driving forward with an obstructive view. He should be driving backwards with that. And then behind that, in the very back, there's a man standing on 2 boxes rather than a proper ladder to reach an object. You've got block safety equipment in the back. A man using his back to lift that box. Basically this whole scene is a mess. But when we're looking for hazards, these are the kinds of things that we're looking for. So this is a really good illustration of what might be going wrong. So some everyday hazards that are present in our workplace. You could have a crush hazard from a poorly stacked pallet. We have pellets and that sort of thing that get underneath especially underneath our packaging and auto box out equipment. You'll have pellet spills, and that'll be right around rotating conveyor belts. That both of those things present a hazard. A pellet is a slip hazard. The conveyor is a pinch hazard. You have forklift strike hazards. We minimize those by putting the barrier up that you see in place in that photo. And then you have a blocked egress hazard where the pedestrian block pathway in that staircase is blocked by a cart. So if someone needed to exit quickly because of an alarm, that object is now blocking their path of exit. So you must be able to identify these hazards and know how to protect yourself and others from injury. You are accountable for safe behavior. Injuries rarely are caused by technical or equipment issues. The majority of injuries are caused by a breakdown in human behavior. Ignoring the hazard or improperly managing the risk can result in devastating incidents. We need to understand what we mean by the term hazard and risk. So a hazard is a chemical, physical, or behavioral condition that has the potential for causing harm to people, property, or the environment. So a chemical hazard might be like an acidic chemical that can burn you if you touch it. A physical hazard might be fire or heat from the manufacturing process. And the behavioral hazard would be something like running a stop sign. So there are two types of hazard in the workplace. You've got visible hazards, which are very easy to recognize, like pellets on the floor. And then you've got hidden hazards, which might be like electrical energy in a circuit, tension in a conveyor belt, or pressure in a pipeline. These are examples of hidden hazards. Like you can't exactly see them with your eyes and see that there's a hazard there, but we know that one exists within that system. So here's a couple examples of visible or hidden hazards. If you have a stretched out spring, you might not see the hazard of the recoil that can come if that spring is unstretched. That would be a hidden hazard. You got pellets on the floor or aerosol left on a desk, or liquid in an unmarked container. All of those are going to be visible hazards. A conveyor not in motion is a hidden hazard because you're not seeing the tension in the belt and that sort of thing. A forklift driver ignoring a stop sign, that's a visible hazard. Pressurized air inside of a pipe, that would be a hidden hazard. And then a rotating conveyor is a visible hazard because you can see that it's moving, so walking on it or something like that would present a hazard. People take risks when they believe negative consequences are not probable, which just means they're not likely. For an example, let's talk about speeding. So they're both positive and negative consequences to speeding. A positive consequence might be you get to your destination quickly. It's fun. It might make you on time for work. The negative consequences might be a car accident, killing someone else in an accident, speeding ticket and fines, decreased fuel efficiency, stress on vehicle, and loss of license. So then we look at how severe are the negative consequences to speeding. So a car accident would be very severe, but it doesn't really happen all that often. Killing someone else in an accident is kind of the same thing. It would be very severe consequence, but it doesn't really happen all that often. Decreased fuel efficiency when you're speeding is not a severe consequence, but that does happen pretty much every time you do it. So people take risks when they believe that the consequence is not severe or unlikely to happen to them. People have a tendency to overestimate their skill and underestimate the consequences. Taking risks will eventually lead to a negative consequence, so why take the risk? Risk-tolerant behavior. So sometimes workers accept too high a level of risk to perform their job safely. Here are some examples. Taking a shortcut versus using an established path. Skipping a step in a procedure because you thought it was unnecessary, using the wrong tool because the correct one was too far away or maybe doesn't exist, ignoring a coworker observed in an unsafe situation. Making proper choices requires you to alter your perception of risk by understanding the worst thing that can happen will happen. It's only a matter of time. So we always tell people we don't want you working with broken equipment. If you see something, say something. Good catches get rewarded with us. through bonuses, extra vacation time, all sorts of things. We really want people to be observant in their on their shifts to prevent incidents and injuries from happening. So we use a risk management model when determining what to do with the different hazards. So we start off with like a vulnerable object, and that's the gentleman here in this picture. It could be a person, it could be property, it could be environment. Those are the things that we're trying to protect. And then you have your hazard, which could be other people using like unsafe behaviors. It could be the process, the location, should it be like hot or confined, the machines or tools, if they could be an incorrect or in disrepair. Certain chemicals could be the hazard. And then you have your barrier. So the barrier can be other people also, like a spotter for a forklift. It could be a management system, including training, maintenance, and verifications to ensure safe operation. Programs and procedures, so the established programs and procedures are followed by everyone all the time. Counteractive chemical agents could be present, and facilities and equipment. So like the PPE provided and the facilities regularly inspected for safety, those things are barriers to the hazard affecting the vulnerable object. So proper barriers in place prevent incidents and work can continue. So in this situation, we have a forklift, which is the hazard, and the man on the forklift is looking back over his shoulder as he backs up, which that is the behavior, that is the barrier that protects the gentleman that might be standing behind the forklift. We also use a physical barrier, like the yellow tape you see here, to block off forklift traffic while we are building boxes on the floor or doing something where we have a lot of pedestrians in the area that forklifts might travel in. An incident is when a barrier is penetrated and the hazard affects the vulnerable object. An example is when a worker cuts her hand because she failed to wear her gloves while working. So in this case, the hazard is the sharp object that cut her. The barrier was the requirement to wear gloves. However, the barrier was penetrated by the behavior of not wearing the gloves and then affected the vulnerable object. A near loss occurs when a barrier is penetrated and the vulnerable object is either not present or affected. So in that same scenario, let's say she wasn't wearing her gloves but handled the sharp object and didn't get cut, that would be a near loss. We use multiple layers of protection as barriers to prevent incidents from occurring. Incidents occur when all barriers fail. So to use that same glove example, you have the hazard of the sharp object. You have a management system that trains people on what PPE is necessary, sign-offs and that sort of thing. You have the facility and equipment. You have the proper PPE provided. And then you have other people around checking in on everybody wearing the proper PPE and people understanding that they need to wear their PPE before doing that task. And all three of those barriers are in place to prevent the hazard of getting cut by that sharp object from affecting the vulnerable object. So human brains are better at recognizing patterns, learning from experience, solving original problems, exercising judgment when events are not clearly defined, reacting to low probability events, and continuing to perform when overloaded. Machines are better at processing, storing, and recalling large quantities of information quickly, doing repetitive, routine, and precise tasks over periods of time, operating environments not hospitable to humans, exerting great force with pressure. The human brain prefers to operate on autopilot. When accustomed to repetition, there is a reduction in conscious thinking. Autopilot mode can continue for a long time without incident, like walking up and down the stairs. Without a constant attention to detail, even routine tasks can lead to incidents and injuries. A good example of this is a lot of times when we're driving home, sometimes people forget how they don't remember getting there, even though they were conscious and driving the entire time. That's your brain going on into autopilot mode. And so we're trying to pull our brains out of autopilot mode for work by actively looking for hazards and doing LPSA conversations and things like that. So when humans are first learning, their brains are actively reasoning. When they have done the task over and over, they pick up routine behaviors, and that could be either rule-based or reasoning-based. Most errors occur during routine operations. Example, skipping a step in a simple task or mixing up the order of steps. Some common causes of that would be insufficient experience, becoming distracted. It might be too complex of a task, not adequately prepared for changes, becoming complacent after long periods without a near loss or incident. We assume it is safe because no one has gotten hurt before. We underestimate the consequences. It's your ability to recognize hazards and the risk they pose and respond correctly. And this follows our LPSA conversations that we do in the morning, and you should be doing throughout your shift to pull your brain out of autopilot mode. So, first, you want to assess the risk. What could go wrong? And then, what is the worst thing that can happen? You analyze how to reduce the risk. So, do you have all the necessary training and knowledge? Do you have all the proper tools and PPE before you even start the job? And then act. What actions are you going to take to make sure the job is done safely? How are you going to follow written procedures? When are you going to get your supervisor involved if something does go wrong? So in this module, you have learned that no matter how capable you are, the most important skill you need to practice every hour of every day is to maintain your focus on working in a safe fashion. You should now know that the potential for personal injury or death is reduced by identifying hazards and mitigating risks. Our main goal is to have everyone go home the same way that they came into work. If we've done that every day, we've had a successful day. It's on everybody to stop behavior that they see is a problem. If you see one of your coworkers not wearing his earplugs, it's a good idea to stop him, pull him to the side and tell him to put his earplugs in. If you see someone driving a forklift too fast or not stopping at the stop signs, we want to, stop that forklift driver. Anybody has the ability to stop anybody at the facility from unsafe behavior. So if you have any questions, please let us know. And that's the end of this presentation.